Well, today, barely a week out from Better in Our Backyards Mining and Energy Expo, I'd like to welcome Ashley Burke. Ashley is the Senior Vice President for Communications for quite a while now for the National Mining Association. Thanks for joining me, Ashley.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, I do as well, and we want people to get kind of a preview of you and what you're all about. You'll, of course, be one of the panelists at Expo next week. And here, once again, as a reminder on the screen, we'll have a link along with this video. If you've not yet signed up, it's not too late. Registrations have been pouring in pretty good. We're probably going to have a full house in Bloomington, Minnesota next week, and as we should because as I've said many times, and I know you agree, Ashley, getting mining upstream, downstream, everything in between is an economic, it's a national security imperative. It could lead to a lot of jobs. And frankly, I think if we do all of this right, we could see an economic resurgence in this country that would rival the Industrial Revolution of over a century ago. But that's the operative thing if we do this right. And I'll get your take on that. But first of all, tell us how you came initially to be with the National Mining Association yourself.
Sure. So I have been with the National Mining Association for almost a decade now, which has gone by really in a flash. And I came from completely outside the industry. I had been in the defense and defense contracting industry for years, for 2 decades, really. And in my work there, I was contacted by a headhunter about this job. And I thought, I don't really know too much about mining. But the more I learned about mining, the more I saw the parallels between what I really loved about the defense industry and the interesting story behind mining. I think both have a workforce that just really loves this country and is so proud of their contributions to the economy, and really does so much for the everyday American. But then on the flip side of that, as a communications person, you see each industry often maligned in the media. And so it was an interesting opportunity to tell a story that I thought wasn't being told to a broad enough audience. And it was really intriguing, and I haven't looked back since.
Well, it's a tall order. I know you've done a good job at it because I followed a lot of your postings and writings and things like that, your work on behalf of the National Mining Association. But you alluded to something that really is still somewhat of a tall order, maybe less bad than it's been for years. But, there's this mentality of milk comes from a grocery store. And back when President Biden, for example, was unveiling all of his electric vehicle mandates and things like that, nice goal. There wasn't enough put with it, of course, to go along with it. There was still this mentality, shockingly, on a lot of people's parts that, these electric vehicles, come out of some magic extrusion machine. They just show up and we're going to fuel them with pixie dust or something like that. Doesn't work that way. So you've had a tall order to try and get people to understand and legislators and policymakers to understand that we need these industries. And you've got a bit of a tailwind now during this Trump 2.0, as some of us call it, because it's now a lot more apparent than ever with what I've long termed a World War III that we already have over commodities and currencies to make sure that we get our own house in order. Because over the years, it wasn't just sneakers and Christmas toys and electronic gadgets that we outsourced to other countries. It's been copper and uranium and so many other things. So how do you see the overall landscape right now? Because I know, the National Mining Association on its website makes the valid point that, hey, made in America, which is what we all seem to be about these days, also means mined in America. Give us an overview of how you see the landscape policy wise and I guess propaganda wise, for lack of a better term, unfolding.
Well, I think there have been probably a lot of global events that have provided an opening for us to talk more about mining and how mining impacts the everyday American. The first, I would say, it was COVID. People all of a sudden became interested in their supply chains. And when they went to the grocery store and they couldn't get paper towels, they started thinking a lot more about where do the things that I use every day really come from? And how are they made possible? What are the parts that make up each of those pieces? So we were able to take advantage of some of that. The other, I would say the second factor really has been China and its willingness to weaponize its global minerals dominance. They have been flipping the switch on and off on rare earths, on other key mineral commodities in a way that really has impacted the markets. It's impacted, we know, the auto industry, it's impacted the defense industry. And this has really played a part in when you see the trade deals that the Trump administration has been negotiating. Critical minerals and mining have been a part of so many deals. It is on the front pages of our newspapers every day. So I think one of the major factors here has been that the world understands now how they're impacted. And I would say the third kind of global event would be, as you mentioned, the emergence of AI and data centers and just how power intensive and materials intensive that kind of rush has been. We need vastly more power than we ever had. I spent the summer just watching the different grids across the country and the near misses that we had in capacity. There were such thin margins between power and a blackout over and over again. And so these are things that, when people are being told, in the middle of a hot summer, turn up your thermostat and don't run your dishwasher, these are real life impacts. And it all comes back to mining.
Well, for sure. And one of the things that I've been at pains to try and get people to understand, but it is, as you pointed out, getting a little bit more understandable to the public and I think the policymakers, is that for so long, especially during the previous administration, we heard this energy transition term. We don't have an energy transition. We have a constant need for energy addition. And it's just off the charts. I mean, another one of the speakers we'll have next week, who I'm sure you know, is Scott Melby, my friend of many, many years, who's the head of the Uranium Producers Association of America, as well as, running a couple of public companies. And he and I, usually on a quarterly basis, we kind of take a current assessment of the uranium and nuclear energy industry. And incrementally, it's dawned on both of us that there's much, much more of a need for even uranium, which has got killer supply and demand fundamentals, from an investment standpoint, but it keeps growing because of all of this insatiable need. Ashley, early on, a lot of people were just giddy over President Trump's early executive orders. We're going to reform permitting reform, try and shorten the many, many years it takes from exploration to discovery to development and so forth. That's great, but are these good intentions and whatnot enough? Where do you see that there's still a lot of work to be done as far as, even beyond policy that's already in place to try and speed up the processes with the EPA or Forest Service or Interior, whoever the case may be?
Yeah, I'll take that really in two parts if that's okay, because I
Sure.
think I don't believe that anyone could have imagined that as much would have been accomplished in the past 9 months as we have seen in this administration. And it hasn't just been the all-out sprint of announcements that we saw from day one that mentioned mining. I mean, mining was top priority, which was really extraordinary. But what's unique about this administration, and as you dig into each one of the agencies, is you always see in administrations a lot of press releases that speak to the policies of the campaign. But this administration and these specific agencies aren't just stopping with the announcements themselves. They really want to see shovels in the ground on new projects. They really want to see job creation. They want to see real progress in addressing our electricity crisis. And I would say whether it's been the Department of Energy, the Department of the Interior, the EPA, or the Energy Dominance Council is a great example. These are folks who really dig in and they work with industry to understand the true impacts of policies on companies themselves. What's happening on the ground? Is this going to make a difference? Is this going to create jobs? And that is so meaningful. And going back to the Energy Dominance Council, the creation of that for so long, our industry has dealt with silos in government. And you would get a really well-intentioned, wonderful inquiry and request for comments from one agency. You'd put in your comments, you'd make all of your recommendations, and sure enough, 60 days later, you would get the same inquiry from another agency because there was no coordination across agencies. Now you have essentially in the Energy Dominance Council this cross collaboration and a much better understanding of what's happening to industries, what can improve things across the board. And so that has been really incredibly valuable.
Well, that's
Um,
great. Yeah. The recent thing that I think was a game changer for all of these things, and already we have the best. I mean, I've been doing this for over 45 years, following the markets and the economy. This is the best by far policy tailwind of any time in my lifetime, what we have from the Trump administration now. The economics, I think, still need to be addressed with a lot of things, but the Defense Department's move with MP Materials out in California recently, I think that was a potential game changer. And there's some noise that the administration realizes that permitting reform is not enough, that we need to have the economic and pricing foundation for a lot of these mining projects as well, because there's a reason why China to date has kind of cornered the market, especially on a lot of downstream parts of the mining industry. It's because they undersell everybody. They haven't just done it on t-shirts and sneakers. It's on finished rare earth magnets. It's on copper. It's on a lot of things. And so the administration doing this with MP Materials recently and setting a floor price that makes economic sense from a Western standpoint, that's a big deal. Do you see many more of these type of things coming?
well, I think that's the perfect example of what we're seeing. It's the application of a business mindset
Right.
right now to it doesn't just stop with political policy making. It's the business minded follow up, and it's understanding that China has been working on this strategy for decades. They are so far ahead of us. They have all of these levers to pull. So when a mine starts up here, okay, they're going to go and flood the market there and, impact the price, making it uneconomical to mine at that site and then operations shut down. So I think the administration, what you're seeing, they understand that and they know that there is no one silver bullet that's going to fix any of this.
Yeah.
To level the playing field, it has to involve a lot of creativity because this didn't happen overnight. We let this happen. This is
Right.
decades of just allowing China to move forward. And so, now it's not just, it's not, as you said, it's not just permitting reform. It's not just litigation reform. Those are very important and those
Mhm.
absolutely have to happen. But it's also the business case that will combat those unfair trade practices that'll make up for, not just, you need price support, you need grants, you need loans, you need incentives like 45X, you need even more than that. And so it's providing that full soup to nuts picture of how do we make things work so that we can start really, truly mining here in a globally competitive way.
Well, and what's really cool is that not only will this help to reinvigorate economic growth, it's going to create lots of jobs that aren't just service sector, lower paying jobs. I mean, you know better than I do, following the industry on a daily basis as you do, that there's terrible labor shortages in many areas of mining and so forth. I mean, it's been a while since there's been any number of young adults going to school to learn a lot of these different trades. And I think that's another part of the public narrative that is changing for the better as well. Real quick, Ashley, before I let you go, I'm greatly looking forward to visiting with you in person next week. But tell us about how you first got acquainted with Better in Our Backyard.
I started seeing some of just their great activity on social media. And, what better organization to really speak to the challenge that we face? These mine materials, the demands continue to increase. So we're going to get them from somewhere. And it is so much better if we are mining them here in the US, where we do so in accordance with the highest labor standards, the highest environmental standards, the highest safety standards. And it just makes sense. So, better in our backyard is just, it really encapsulates everything that we need to be doing in the mining industry, in the United States, across industries. All of it is better when it's done here with US jobs.
And the name says it all for sure. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for taking a few minutes. I know you're just off your annual meeting. You just got back late last night, as you told me, to Washington. So I appreciate you carving out this time for us. And again, I'm greatly looking forward to seeing you next week. And the rest of you that are listening to this, if you've not already made your arrangements to get to Bloomington, do so now. The link is on the show notes here to the video. And Ashley, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next week.